If you care about how people actually survived occupation, bombardment and total war, then you're in the right place. And before we go any further, subscribe to this channel because this is where serious history lives and breathes. Today, we're stepping into a part of World War II that rarely gets the attention it deserves. Not tanks or generals, but whispers, clicks, and coded phrases that decided who lived, who died, and whether entire resistance networks survived another night. Stay with me for the next minute, because once you understand how fragile and dangerous wartime communication really was, you'll never hear the word signal the same way again. During World War II, survival often depended on whether a message could travel unseen through a city crawling with enemy patrols. In occupied Europe, a single mistimed radio transmission could bring the Gestapo to your door within hours. Resistance fighters, downed airmen, Jewish families in hiding, and entire underground movements were only as strong as their ability to communicate without being detected. This wasn't abstract strategy. This was daily life under siege, and communication was the thin line between liberation and execution. How radio became both a lifeline and a death sentence under occupation. Portable radios transformed resistance warfare, but they also created lethal risk. The Germans deployed direction-finding vans capable of triangulating a transmitter in minutes. Operators working for Britain's Special Operations Executive or the American Office of Strategic Services were trained to transmit for no longer than 20 minutes, sometimes less. They learned to set up, transmit, dismantle and disappear before detection teams could close in. This discipline saved lives. Operators rotated locations constantly, transmitting from attics one day, basements the next, never twice from the same place in quick succession. For modern survivalists, the lesson is timeless. Any repeated signal creates a pattern, and patterns are what surveillance feeds on. Whether you're thinking about modern digital privacy or emergency comms after a disaster, minimizing transmission time and varying location remains essential. How, you might wonder, did coded language actually turn ordinary broadcasts into weapons? Well, one of the most effective tools of covert communication was, quite simply, hiding meaning in plain sight. The BBC, for instance, broadcast thousands of so-called personal messages into occupied Europe, phrases that, to a casual listener, sounded utterly trivial, but in reality carried precise operational meaning. For example, Jean has a long moustache could signal that a weapons drop was imminent. On the other hand, another phrase might warn that a safe house had been compromised. These broadcasts worked precisely because they blended into the everyday noise. For resistance members, the real skill wasn't just about memorizing codes, but, knowing when to act and when not to. Acting too quickly could expose an entire network, while acting too slowly could doom an operation. This delicate balance between speed and restraint is something serious planners still study even today. In practical terms, it teaches us that secure communication isn't only about encryption, it's also about context, timing, and, having a plausible cover. Encryption, of course, mattered a great deal, but actually discipline mattered even more. One-time pads, when used correctly, were mathematically unbreakable, but when used incorrectly, they could be utterly fatal. Some resistance cells, out of desperation or just convenience, reused pads. allowing German cryptanalysts to break entire networks. This is where the Shadow War intersected with the more famous code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park, where Allied analysts attacked systems like the Enigma. The difference is that resistance operators had no margin for error. One mistake didn't lose a battle, it erased people. The takeaway here is harsh but valuable. Security systems only work when humans respect their limits. Whether you're protecting sensitive research, planning resilient communication for emergencies, or studying intelligence tradecraft. World War II resistance failures show that, well, complacency kills faster than enemy brilliance. How couriers and dead drops, stayed relevant in a mechanized war. When radios became just too dangerous, resistance networks reverted to methods that looked ancient, but, well, still worked. Human couriers, often women or teenagers who attracted less suspicion, carried messages sewn into clothing or memorized word for word. Dead drops concealed messages inside hollowed-out bricks, fence posts, or abandoned mailboxes. Resistance groups also transmitted deliberately misleading information once they suspected compromise. A fake message could trigger an enemy raid on an empty location, buying time for real operatives to vanish. This concept of controlled misinformation, honestly, remains central to modern intelligence and cybersecurity. Why these lessons still matter for survival and resilience today. World War II's covert communicators operated under constant threat, limited resources, and brutal consequences. Their success came from discipline, adaptability, and an understanding that communication itself is a battlefield. For historians, this reveals how wars are won long before shots are fired. For survival-minded viewers, it offers concrete principles. Reduce your signal footprint, vary routines, layer communication methods, and never assume technology alone will save you. These weren't theoretical ideas. They kept pilots alive, families hidden, and resistance movements breathing under the weight of occupation. That's why this subject deserves careful study, not romanticization. If this deep dive gave you something new to think about, subscribe to the channel. Share this episode with someone who takes history seriously, and keep this knowledge alive. The past still has lessons to teach if we're willing to listen.